y'all it's time.
Come on. Let's go. Let's do it.
Rolling on the road
With the doc.
rolling on the road
With Dave.
rolling on the road.
With the doc.
100 shades of diversibility with Dave and Dr. Burton.
All right. That was cool. Yeah. Hey, that was nice.
Hey, and we are so excited. We are rolling all the way to California today. Everybody, there we go. Clap, 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 clap. We are in California. I tell you, last week, oh, there's Shayna. Good afternoon, Shayna. How are you today? Shayna is tuning in all the way from Bel Air, Maryland. So we are coast to coast, everybody. We've got East Coast, West Coast, but no feuding, okay? No feuding. And here I am in the Midwest. I just love technology. What do you think about that, Mr. Michael?
I love it.
Oh, and there he is.
And no feuding.
Hey, what's up? We're live and I'm late.
Oh, do we need to go back and do it again for you?
No, I'm good. No need to all that. I love it. I'll sing along.
Shayna said, all love. I said to them today, we're traveling. I said all the way to California today. I said, we got West Coast with Michael. We got East Coast with Shayna. And I said, but no feuding today. And I said, and you got me in the middle, in the Midwest.
All right, the snowy Midwest.
Dave, you want to do the honors about our guest?
In what way? What's the honors?
We're going to do a drum roll, please. Can y'all hear the drum rolling? I am so excited to have, I guess I should say we should all be excited. We have Mr. Michael Hingson, who was in 9/11. Wow. You have a different dog now than you did back then.
Oh, yeah. I have a black lab named Alamo.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do we start there, Dr. Kimberly? What was your pre 9/11, post 9/11? Michael, welcome to our Rolling on the Road with the connection, and we'll probably talk about Accessibility as well and your work.
I am very happy to do all of that
with them,
and
so
no feuding, and no feuding.
Yeah, and no feuding.
Nope.
We want to say hey to Jenny Merkel. She's a special guest. She only happens to be Dave's sister-in-law or sister-in-love.
There you go.
So that's wonderful that family even watches us.
We try to reach out and welcome all. So yeah, well, Michael, what is the thumbnail sketch of your story? And then we'll dive deeper into parts and pieces.
I've been blind my whole life. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and the doctors told my parents to send me off to a home because no blind child could ever grow up and do anything. And my parents disagreed with that, and they brought me up with that kind of attitude, and I've lived that attitude my entire life. So I was very blessed to go to college, get a master's degree in physics and a secondary teaching credential, and I've had several jobs along the way, and up to and including and past September 11th, 2001. After September 11th, the world heard a lot about my story, and the media started posting and wanting interviews about it. And the result of all that was that people started asking me to come and speak and talk about what lessons they should learn from September 11th. And also what my story was about. And so the result of all that was that I decided to change from selling computer hardware, which I was doing on September 11th and managing a sales force for a Fortune 500 company, and instead decided I would sell life and philosophy and begin speaking. And I felt that if telling my story and talking about lessons to learn from September 11th, talking about leadership, trust, and teamwork, and then later adding other topics like one of my favorites is called moving from diversity to inclusion, and allowing myself to be hired to go and speak, if I could teach people a little bit more about blindness and disabilities, if I could help people move on from September 11th, then it was worth doing. So selling life and philosophy is a whole lot more fun than selling computer hardware, as I said. And so I've been doing it ever since.
Shana said she loves your parents, and that's how it should be for all of us that with lives with a disability.
I wish it were the case. And unfortunately, all too many people buy into the whole argument that, well, when you're disabled, you're less than so-called able-bodied people. But as you and I, Dr. Kimberly, were talking about just before we started this today, the reality is every person on this planet has a disability. And for most people, the one visible disability is that you're light dependent. And if the lights suddenly go out and you can't find a phone or smartphone or a flashlight right away, you're in the dark and you're in a loss. And it doesn't happen much because technology and people have emphasized looking for and finding ways to create light on demand so much that the disability is mostly covered up. But the reality is it's not always covered up. And there are times that power goes out and people can't find something right away and they're stuck for a little while until they work it out. Doesn't bother me a bit for the lights to go out. The fact is, disability does not mean a lack of ability. Disability is a characteristic that every single person on the planet has to one degree or another and in one way or another. And what we need to do is to recognize that it just manifests itself differently for different people, but it's still there for everyone. And I wish people would learn to recognize that and would recognize that just because some of us are different in some ways than other people, it doesn't make us less.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been blind my whole life. My wife was in a wheelchair her whole life until she passed in November of 2022. And people said, well, how could you marry a person in a wheelchair? Or to her, how could you marry a person who was blind? How do you guys do anything? And as I pointed out, she reads, I push, works out really well.
I love it. I mean, it sounds a lot like me and my dad, huh, Dave?
Exactly.
But I have very, very selfish reasons for having you here today. Today, my father would have been 79 years old, and Dave knows him very well. My dad was the chairman of the Friend of the Court Advisory Board, and he was blind. Had been blind probably almost 30 years before he died. I think about 30 years or so. And today's his birthday. So I said I needed to talk to somebody that I feel that is just as intelligent as he is.
Well, happy birthday, Dad, wherever you are, and hope you're listening.
And I just kind of needed to have one of those conversations with him today, you know. And I said, what greater person than to have the conversation with Mr. Michael. But Dave, I think that he's really echoing a lot of things that we've been working on for years together.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, that's been a really cool thing about this show is, as Dr. Kimberly said, from coast to coast, we keep finding people who are, kindred spirits and allies in this work to, as you said, Michael, it's like we're all just people and we all have different ways of doing things, and we need to focus on that. And how do we include and we accommodate folks for all kinds of reasons in all kinds of ways, but we categorize disability and we see it as less, and accommodation for disability is something special. But if you accommodate work schedules because of kids' school programs, that's just, it's just family, it's not special.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, how are we uncovering and putting a spotlight on We're all just people.
We are all just people.
We are. There are 1,683 words that begin with the prefix dis. And so when I go out and I talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I call it that what I teach is an aid, because everyone has, as you all stated, some sort of dis. And if we start with the presumption that everyone is disabled, then we're not making accommodations for those people. Because now we have an opportunity to look and say, wait a minute, I have more dis than they do if I take it in its totality, and not just look at, okay, just in the physical sense, but we still have the mental and the emotional and the spiritual, where I'm really at a disadvantage. And like you did point out earlier, when we were in the quote unquote green room, that there are some words that begin with dis that don't always have a negative connotation. But I just think that we're all saying the same thing. Let's start out on an even playing field. And I believe that the pandemic did that for everybody, that everybody got to see what it was like to be disadvantaged, disabled, disconnected from their community.
It's interesting. Language does evolve, and it should evolve. So I get an email every day called Word of the Day, and the word of the day today was prestigious.
I get that too.
So did you read Enegard's message today? Prestigious, which is
Yes.
a word about honoring, but it used to mean deceitful and was a negative term, but it's gone 180 degrees from what it used to be to now being a very positive term. The reality is we need to recognize disability does not mean a lack of ability. That is a prejudice that has to go away.
I agree. Like Dave, I love it. He does conspire or conspiracy, and
Nice.
has definitely made that so positive, because we're always conspiring here on Rolling on the Road on how we can do the next great thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my line is, unfortunately, Richard Nixon gave conspiracy a bad rap.
He was one, but we're finding some people who are doing a lot more with that now than even Richard Nixon.
Well, that's a different story.
It is. Well, it's part of the same story, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you read that comment, Dave?
Sure. Shana says, yes, Mr. Michael, just because we live with a disability doesn't make us any less than.
That's correct. And like I said, though, everybody lives with a disability, whether you recognize it or not, or whether technology covers it up, it's still there. Disability is a common characteristic everyone has. It just manifests itself differently depending on what your particular disability happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
True. It is now quarter after the hour. If you are in Eastern Standard Time, it's about 4:15. And if you're out there on the West Coast with Mr. Michael, it is about 12:15.
1:15.
1:15.
1:15. You're right. I'm counting back. I'm in Central
And if you're in
Standard Time.
Colorado and freezing, it's 2:15. Or if you're here in Chicago and freezing, it's 3:15.
Yes. And so we want to say thank you so much for tuning in to Rolling on the Road. And we all love shameless plugs around here. So we want to say thank you to Accessibility for lending us Mr. Michael. And we want to say thank you to Unstoppable Minds, which is a podcast that Mr. Michael hosts that you can listen to on any of your favorite outlets that has and hosts podcasts. So please check him out, look him up. And great guy. We're just honored to have him on today. And if you call him, I love his voicemail. It says, hey, this is Larry King. I want to introduce you to this guy who's been on my show several times. And I was like, wait a minute, did I call the right number?
So Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And it's that way deliberately because when we talk about diversity, that doesn't tend anymore to include disabilities. which is all of us anyway. But when we talk about inclusion, we're not going to let people do that. I've had several people say to me, well, we are partially inclusive. No, you're either inclusive or you're not. And it's a mindset as much as anything. But Unstoppable Mindset is really allowing people to come on and tell their story, whatever it happens to be. It's not at all necessarily about disabilities. It's fun to do. Accessibility asked me to do it when I joined in 2021, and we started it in August of 2021. And today we just published episode 197 2 years ago in August of 2022. It got to be so visible and interesting to people on LinkedIn, and we had so many requests to come on it that we had to go from 1 to 2 episodes a week. So we publish episodes on Tuesday and Friday, and so it's a lot of fun to do. And as we talked about earlier, I love to travel and speak and do a lot of that. So if anybody needs a speaker for an organization to motivate or inspire them, or they want to learn about inclusion and diversity, or they want to learn about emergency preparedness and so on, email me at speaker@michaelhingson.com, MICHAELHINGSON.com. I respond to emails, or go to my website, michaelhingson.com. And, the idea is that we're all in this together. We're all on the same spaceship, planet Earth, and we need to help each other any way we can.
Awesome.
Yes. We got a congratulations, Mr. Michael.
Yep. From Shayna again, still hearing from the East Coast. So when did you move to the West Coast, Michael?
Well, I was born in Chicago, but we moved to California when I was 5. So
okay.
After graduating college and so on, I took a job, and that eventually had me ending up on the East Coast in Boston from 1978 to 1981. And then the company I worked for, Kurzweil Computer Products, was in the process of being courted by Xerox to join forces. And so I was asked to go back to the West Coast to help integrate Kurzweil into Xerox. So I moved back to California and held a couple jobs and owned my own company for a while. But eventually in 1996, a company I was working for asked if I would relocate back to the East and open an office in New York City for them, because we were selling to the East Coast and being successful enough that Wall Street wanted us to have an office there. So I moved back to the East Coast with my wife. She wasn't really enamored about moving to the New Jersey, New York area, but we did. And that eventually led to me being hired by Quantum Corporation and opening the office in the World Trade Center on the 78th floor of Tower 1. The office actually opened in August of 2000. And then after September 11th, we made the decision that two things happened. Guide Dogs for the Blind, where I've gotten all of my dogs, asked if I would come and be their national spokesperson. And so I became their national public affairs director, as well as also traveling and speaking. So that gave us the excuse and the support to move back to California, which we did in 2002. And we lived in the Bay Area until 2014, and then we moved down to Southern California to be closer to family. So we've been all over the U.S.
Yay.
Yeah. So then back to that pivot moment, though, of, you've gotten a fair amount of attention because of your experience of your office being in the World Trade Center. So what was that part of the story?
When we were looking for office space, it turns out that the World Trade Center Port Authority real estate people gave us the best deal, which is why we opened the office. That was a neat place to be, because we were really in the financial hub of things. And so we set the office up and opened it. We actually had elevators that came straight to our floor from the first floor. We had what was called a sky lobby. So elevators came from floor 1 to floor 78, took 48 seconds, I think it was. They traveled at 23 miles an hour. Really fun, big, huge elevators. And so it was a lot of fun. And we were able to work with a lot of customers, and we had reseller partners and so on as well. And the idea was that we were selling the products that people would attach to their computer networks to back up their data. But at that time, it was mostly done via magnetic tape, very high density magnetic tape called digital linear tape, DLT.
Mhm.
And so we worked with companies, we sold the products, worked with our reseller partners. And in fact, on September 11th, we were going to be holding seminars to teach people how to sell our products, to teach our resellers how to sell our products when everything happened and it all changed. And we had no idea what happened at first, other than the fact that the building started to tip. We felt and heard a muffled thud, and then the building began to tip, and then it came back. And people say, well, of course you didn't know, you couldn't see it. Well, that's getting back to the whole thing that people are clueless. The reality is the airplane hit between floors 93 and 99 on the north side of the building, and we were on floor 78. So I just average it and say the building was hit at floor 96. And we were on floor 78, 18 floors below, and on the other side of the building. Of course I didn't see it. Nobody saw it. None of us knew. Going down the stairs, nobody knew. The last time I checked, Superman and X-ray vision aren't real. So anyway, but people try to rationalize and make themselves feel comfortable and superior by saying, well, if we had been there, we would have known. No, you wouldn't. When we were going down the stairs, nobody knew. In fact, I began smelling an odor when we got into the stairwell, and it took me 4 floors to recognize that I was smelling the fumes from burning jet fuel. And when I observed that to other people, they said, yeah, we were trying to figure out what the odor is. We must have been hit by an airplane, but we had no clue what was going on and didn't know until we got down and got out, and actually both towers collapsed. And then the phone circuits were free enough that I was able to reach my wife. I had called her just after the plane hit, long before the media got the story, and told her that we were evacuating. And then I wasn't able to reach her again until both buildings had collapsed. Of course, in the stairwell, there was no way to reach anyone because we were in literally this tube going downstairs, which was surrounded by metal and so on. So there was no cell service. So the bottom line is we had no idea what was going on until after the towers fell. And then she was the first one to tell me how 2 aircraft had been crashed into the towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and a 4th was still missing over Pennsylvania.
And so you made it down all 78 flights.
The only way to go, because there was fire. A colleague who was in for the day to help with the seminars, David Frank, saw fire outside. And I had spent a lot of time after moving into the World Trade Center learning all I could about the complex, including how to get around, where everything was, and spending time learning how to deal with emergencies. I learned what to do in an emergency because I wasn't going to read signs, and I can't necessarily rely on sighted people being around, much less keeping their wits about them. So it was my job to know all of that. And because also I was the leader of the office. What I didn't realize until much later was that that was also helping me develop a mindset that says, you know what to do if there's a problem. And so when the plane hit, the mindset kicked in. And so I was able to focus and evacuate others and help others. And one of the things when David saw fire, and then we had guests in the office, and I asked David Frank, my colleague, to get them to the stairs. I said, don't let them take elevators because you saw fire outside. And if that gets into the central core of the World Trade Center where the elevators are, people could perish. Well, it did happen, but not with our people. That David got to the stairs because he did get them to the stairs and not the elevator.
Now, my question to you, because I'm hearing this, and what I hear in all of it is that the quote unquote, I'm doing my air quotes, that the disabled person was more abled in the situation than the able-bodied people were.
Well, again, my particular disability as opposed to others, but the fact is I prepared, right? That's the real issue. And anyone else could prepare, but most people don't. And it happens as much today that people don't really prepare for emergencies. You figure you can see the signs. Shouldn't do that. You should know what to do. Knowledge really is power and a help in the process. So, yes, I knew what to do, and that gave me the advantage of being able to focus and not worry about things. And yeah, something could have been different. It could have been that we were going down the stairs and suddenly the whole building collapsed. And in that case, it wouldn't have mattered. Nothing I could do. The fact is that you go with what you got. And I spent the time to learn what to do. So I would also say I would like to think that if I had eyesight, my makeup is such that I would have also still worked to know what to
Responded the
do.
same way.
I would
Hmm.
have I would have known what to do, and I would have acted the same way. Who knows? That's not what
Right.
happened because I was blind and am blind. But I would like to think that I focus on details, and so I would have learned anyway.
I like that response because I think about that all of the time. One of the things that I have appreciated with being in the disability community this is now the beginning of my 11th year is there's always problem solving,
Hmm.
and I guess we never meet a problem that we can't solve. And then you add that to the fact that I was in the military. And so I think that it makes me think more as if there is no box and always looking for that extra way. Just like my home, one of the first things that EA said was you have to have more than one way of egress. So anytime I come into a building, I'm always looking for, what are my ways of egress
Well,
in case
right.
anything happens.
Right. And I do that as well. And the issue is, again, it gets back to preparation. Um, and it is something that we all can do.
And I guess, when you spend 10 years being trained on how to deal with a crisis, I was stationed on a ship. And one of the things that we would do, we would quote unquote play war games, if you will, and as if we were being attacked. And so they would tell us that, okay, they just dropped a bomb, it hit the helo deck, and, C3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are now on fire. So now we have to find another way to get everybody out. They even had people wear prosthetics that had injuries. Some people, their abdomen was coming out, and others, their arm was missing or a leg. And so we would have to patch you up, figure out, and of course, there were no lights on in the ship. So we had to
Right.
figure out how to navigate through this ship, 1,700 folks on board, and how to get out to safety and get up to, the decks where we could get the buoys that we could drop to the side and evacuate the ship.
Right. Right.
So I think about that type of training. And as soon as I was reading all of your information, and I just said, wow, it's amazing how we can prepare, and how the average person who is able-bodied is so they rely on their quote unquote ability that it makes them disabled because they're not thinking about any other way than I can see, I can hear, I can walk, and that's all I need.
One of the things that I realized when the pandemic began is that I've talked for 20 years about not being afraid, but never taught people how to learn to control fear. And I think that's a very important issue. And controlling fear doesn't mean that you're not afraid, but you
Mhm.
use it as a powerful tool rather than letting it blind, as I put it, or paralyze or overwhelm you so you can't think. And you can learn to do that. It's a muscle, it's a process, but you can learn it. So I began, among other things, writing a book that will be published later this year. And it uses the example of my 8 guide dogs and my wife's service dog, who was actually the mother of one of my guide dogs, and the things that they did during various aspects of our lives, my wife's life and mine, that um, gave us good lessons on dealing with fear. And the book is entitled "Live Like a Guide Dog: Stories of True Stories of a Blind Man and His Dogs," about overcoming adversity, moving forward, and walking through in faith. And
Mhm.
the reality is that Well, actually, I guess the title's Live Like a Guide Dogs, True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs About Being Brave, Overcoming Adversity, and Moving Forward in Faith. I always forget the subtitle. It will be published later this year, and it is actually available for pre-order now. And I think I sent you the link to that. You could put it in the notes
Yes.
if you want. But the issue is we can learn to control fear. We don't need to let it be our enemy. It can be a very useful tool if we would but let it.
I agree. We spent from May until about, I want to say September, October, maybe even partially into November, talking about building, developing, and maintaining your inner strength.
It's a
And
process, and you can learn to do it. Anyone can learn to do it. The reality is
so
that
I think
we are our own best teachers, and we need to learn to do that.
it is now 4:30. We want to say thank you so much for tuning into Rolling on the Road with Dr. Kimberly and Dave. We are so excited to have our guest, Mr. Michael Hingson. And many of you who were around back in 9/11 probably saw him on the Larry King Show, CNN, CBS, the History Channel, as they were interviewing him and his experience with his guide dog at that time and the number of people that he was able to get out of the building. And I'm loving all of the aspects. It's almost like a spider web, or maybe even like a multifaceted diamond. When you put the diamond in the sunlight, you start to see all these many facets that come from this one stone. And I would have to say, Michael, you are like a brilliant diamond that has the sun shining through it, and we're able just to glean just a little bit of the many facets that are contained within you. And so we want to say thank you for this time that we've had. I mean, we probably only have about 15, 20 more minutes of your time, and we really want to use it wisely. It's just so much. I think I'm just in awe, and I don't think I could have asked for a better person to spend my father's birthday with than having these conversations with you and to listen to you. One of the things that he used to tell me all the time, he goes, "Don't let them talk to your hair," which I had no hair, and he says, and don't let them talk to your physicality. And he would say the same thing about himself: "Don't talk to my eyes, and don't talk to my hair," because his hair was all white. And of course, he could not, I'd say he didn't have natural vision, but he had spiritual vision. And it was just interesting the way he was able to do things. I think one of my most favorite stories that he would tell is how he got lost in his own backyard, and to find out that he was only 2 feet away from the steps to come back into the house, and how my brother called out to him and said, "Dad, what are you doing? Where are you?" And how he cried because he didn't realize how close he was to the door. And from that day on, he said, "I will never allow myself to be blind." And he asked God to give him, the insight to see, and how he learned his way around the city streets. I mean, a lot of things he remembered from being sighted, but others was having to navigate now that he didn't have, sight, but he had insight. And I saw in one of your descriptions about you was how you learned how to ride a bike. So that was kind of like my segue to, he learned how to navigate the city streets by himself by just feeling the wind on his face. And so he knew how to get around by and what direction he was going in based off of how he felt the wind on his face. How were you able to learn how to ride a bicycle?
I listened. The reality is that there isn't just one way to do stuff. And so I learned to listen as I was riding my bike. I could tell when I was close to a curb or coming up on a parked car, or if there was a car behind me coming up or in front of me coming up, so I could move to the side. I learned to do all of that. The first book I wrote was called Thunderdog, the story of a blind man, his guide dog, and
Yes.
the triumph of trust at Ground Zero. And in a section near the end called Guide Dog Wisdom, number 2 in Guide Dog Wisdom, in part says, don't let your sight get in the way of your vision.
Oh,
And
wow.
the reality is that we do that way too often. We let sight get in the way of vision. I've got lots of vision. I'm not, you and I talked about this whole issue of visually impaired, which is a horrible term. It should be blind or low vision. But as I tell people, I got lots of vision. I just don't see so good. It's okay if people want to equate eyesight to vision. I understand that. And I'm not ready to pick on that fight. But I'm not visually impaired. I'm not impaired. And vision has nothing to do with it. And so there are skills and ways to do all sorts of things that we can learn. You talked about what your father did, and there are probably other things that if there were better services that could have taught him some things, might have even assisted more. But the bottom line is that people with eyesight do things in certain ways because they have eyesight. Then there are people who are light independent or blind, and we do things in the way we do because we are blind. It doesn't make what we do less or what sighted people do more. It's two different ways of doing the same thing. And like you in a wheelchair, there is no reason that today we can't make our world really completely accessible for persons in chairs. And we've got to stop thinking that anyone is less than anyone else, because the reality is that you can create circumstances where anyone can be less than they would normally expect themselves to be.
Now, I have a question. What did you do before they had curb cutaways?
Well, so there are two kinds of curb cuts to deal with. One is where it gradually gets flat and goes down to the street, or another where it's a real curb cut where there's a ramp. So I don't deal with the ones that where you have just these flat exits to sidewalks, but regular curb cuts. So what I did was using a dog or a cane, I would walk down the sidewalk until I got to the curb. And then I would listen to make sure I was facing the right way to either cross the street, or if I wanted to turn and cross the other way, I could do that. Curb cuts can be a little bit of a challenge, again, depending on exactly how they're designed for me. But there are also ways to deal with them. So curb cuts don't bother me. The only ones that I have a real problem with are the flat curbs, where they completely just gradually over a number of feet lower the level of a sidewalk down to the street, so you can't even tell where the sidewalk ends and the street begins. They're not doing that so much anymore, which is a good thing. But curb cuts are not a real problem for me, and there are ways to deal with them wherever you go.
Well, it's funny, coincidental, because one of the podcasts of yours I listened to, you had a former Miss Wheelchair, and you all were talking about, the technical term folks out there are the truncated domes, or the tactile warnings at curb cuts that tell you where the curb cut ends, and it also gives directional, it gives direction to where the crosswalk actually is as well.
Depending on how well they're designed, but go ahead.
Well, the statistic today that we shared with folks in downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan, there are 96 different ways curbs and curb cuts are done. So the uniformity to help figure out if you need those tactile warnings for direction, there's 96 different ways our system here. And so I mean, it's not only, one of my favorite pictures that we took shows where the tactile warning would be, and let's say it would be 3 feet wide, maybe, well, 4 feet wide. The 2-foot middle section of that was a manhole cover. And so the manhole cover, and just on the edges were the tactile warnings. And so it's like, what is a person supposed to do with this when they come upon it?
The
Well,
fact
I don't
is,
like the one where they go at an angle, because I don't have depth perception. So I don't like the tactile. So I don't like that, and I don't like it when it goes at an angle.
the fact is that the truncated domes can be more of a challenge than they're worth. Look, if I'm using a dog or a cane and I'm walking down a sidewalk and there are curb cuts, that's what I need to deal with. If I'm in a subway station, the tactile truncated dome strips are not all that wide anyway. And do they really help me when I'm trying to make sure I don't fall off the subway into the to the path of a train? The fact is, again, if I'm using a dog or a cane, I can function just fine. And the truncated domes don't really add the value that a lot of people want to think that they do, including a lot of blind people. But that's my opinion. And I can tell you that, and Dr. Kimberly, I expect you would probably feel the same way. If you're in a wheelchair and have to go over strips of those truncated domes, it's going to shake your head and shake your neck up, and it's very bad.
Yeah, and
my wife hated them, and I appreciate it.
Right, and that's your guest. Yep, your guest on your podcast had that same comment, and somebody brought that up at a meeting this afternoon as well, that what was or is intended to be helpful for folks of low vision is almost a full stop barrier for folks who use wheelchairs.
You haven't yet demonstrated that they are really an infinitely great help for people with low vision. That's the point. But the architectural board has deemed them a mandate, and so we have them. But I question the wisdom of that. Ultimately, it's like audible traffic signals that give you beeps and so on to tell you when the light is changed, or if you're in an intersection with a number of different ways to cross, it'll tell you which way is red and which way is green so you can cross. And people say, now we have audible traffic signals, it's safe. No, the audible traffic signals have nothing to do with safety. They give you an indication of when you're supposed to be able to go, but you do still need to observe the traffic by listening to it or by watching it. And audible traffic signals don't necessarily add value at every street corner. And there isn't a need for it at every street corner if a person is taught or learns to use a cane or a dog properly.
Yep.
But like for me, I'm hard of hearing and I wear hearing aids, and it does not help me to hear the audible.
Right. I understand that.
It's not helpful.
There are some other technologies, and they haven't been developed as much as they could be, that actually can be something you hold in your hand and point to the street, and it can give you an indication of when a vehicle is passing. That's just one example. But the bottom line is, we could devote a little bit of effort to technology to give you, who can't hear the vehicles or the audible signals, other ways of getting information to make sure that you know when it's safe to cross.
Right.
I just follow the people and hope that they're not going against the traffic.
Yeah.
There are times when I've done that and I'm like, oh crap, they went against, the traffic, and they just went when it was kind of convenient. And here I am in a wheelchair, and I'm just like, oh man.
I've done that. I followed people. Yeah, I hear you.
So.
Yep.
But it is now, can you believe it, 4:45 Eastern Standard Time. Wow.
Which means it's
time flies,
9:45 in London. But anyway.
Wow. Well, we got about 10, maybe 10 to 15 more minutes. You
Yeah, I
want to
have to
let's
go at about 5 to 2, but yeah.
all right. So we got about 5 minutes to give
Okay.
us what is accessibility.
Accessibility is a company that began out of necessity in 2017. In 2015, 3 guys in Israel started making websites for people, and then Israel passed a legislation that said all websites need to be accessible. These guys were so successful that they had to figure out a way to deal with all their customers, and they came up with a method that in part uses and used artificial intelligence, um, and it's now be expanded well beyond that. But they developed technologies that were inexpensive and could work a lot to help make websites more inclusive and accessible for people with a variety of different kinds of disabilities. So it's not just blindness. For example, if you're a person with epilepsy and you go to a website with blinking elements, it could throw you into a seizure. But if accessibility is on the site, then you can enter a profile and push a button that will stop the elements from blinking. If you're blind and use a screen reader, you can push a button that will cause the Access widget up in the cloud to transmit the codes that help make websites a lot more accessible, like labeling links, um, showing menus, um, and
You
properly
get all of
labeling
the
links and
instructions.
checkboxes and so on.
I love it. I got my training last week,
Good
and
for
I'm
you.
excited to say that I'm creating a whole new website, and I'm putting it on putting the code on there. So my website will have accessibility on there, and I love it. When I went through a website
Congratulations.
that I know, I'm just like so excited. When I went through a website that had accessibility on there, it was nice to know because it has a little widget down at the bottom, and you click on it, and you can get even in colors the type of wheelchair if you want the wheelchair. So of course you know mine's going to be purple. But anyway, um, I
Guys,
love that you can choose everything that is necessary for you. So like I can click on there that I have cataracts, and so it changes the screen to accommodate cataracts. If you have glaucoma, it can change the screen for that. If you have migraines, it even changes the screen. So I love it. People don't want to say, "Well, I'm not disabled. I just have migraines." But if you can think about
Yeah, well,
being able to change a screen to accommodate you, oh my gosh, it,
yeah.
it just, I love it. Oh, there goes the eyelash. Okay. But it's just,
how
it
does
is
somebody
different.
connect? Oh, go ahead.
Well, what I want to say and what's most important, it goes above and beyond the ADA requirements. It's not just, okay, when you go on the website, it's going to say Black woman with really long eyelashes, looks like she has spiders or butterflies on her face and has no hair, has, green eyes and has, hooped earrings. It's more than that. It goes beyond, just describing.
The most exciting thing about accessibility is it's scalable. So let me give you an example. I was contacted a couple of years ago by someone who was on a website and trying to buy something, and accessibility was on the site, and they activated accessibility. They went to the shopping cart, and they were having a problem making something work in the shopping cart, and they reported it. And they reported it to me actually, and I sent it to the appropriate folks at accessibility. And within a short time, accessibility wrote back and said, "Yep, there was a problem. We were in our interacting with the shopping cart, but we fixed it," and they did. The point being, though, that because this is a widget that lives in the cloud, anyone now or in the future that used that same shopping cart on their website would automatically have that fixed. So when you fix it for one, you fix it for all. The system constantly learns. It's great, and it makes it a lot more usable. So be assured that no matter what you're doing with it, if other people report problems or you discover something and you report it, and it gets fixed, it's fixed for everyone. And that's great. Does this replace manual coding and all the people who code by hand? No, but it can sure help a lot. And so it's a great tool. It's a great program. And I am so glad that it's here and get to be a part of it.
Yes. So your time with us is up. Can you please once again give them your information if they want to get a hold to you?
Sure. Again, my name is Michael, Michael Hingson, Hingson. You can go to my website, www.michaelhingson.com, or you can go to michaelhingson.com/podcast to learn all about Unstoppable Mindset podcast, or you can find Unstoppable Mindset wherever you listen to podcasts, or it's even up on YouTube. As I said, I do look for speaking events and would love to talk to anyone who might be seeking a speaker to come and talk about leadership or trust and teamwork, emergency preparedness like we did today, talk about disabilities, moving from diversity to inclusion, and so on. You can email me by emailing speaker@michaelhingson.com, or you can go to my website, michaelhingson.com, and there's contact information there as well. And as I mentioned, Thunderdog is available wherever books are sold. And so is a second book we wrote for kids called Running with Roselle, but more adults buy it than children. So it's available on Amazon, but Thunderdog is available wherever books are sold. And then Live Like a Guide Dog will be out later this year. And in your show notes, people will be able to see a link where they can go to pre-order the book and learn more about it as well.
And as we always do, we love to support those who are in business. So we'll pick up a few copies and we will send them out to our top viewers on behalf of Rolling on the Road. So, and
Perfect.
if you don't mind,
Thank you.
If you can sign a couple of copies, we greatly appreciate it, and get those out to our top viewers.
We'll work on that. I've got new books on order, so I've got to wait for a stash to come in.
Sounds good to me. Dave, any final words?
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm looking forward to, I have a sense a conspiracy is brewing here. And, and I like that.
Perfect. Nothing wrong with that.
Any final words, Mr. Michael?
No, I want to thank you for letting me be here, and I really appreciate all the kind things you said about Accessibe. Anyone who wants to learn more about Accessibe can go to www.accessibe.com, and Accessibe is spelled ACCESSIBE. And if you go to accessibe.com, there is a place where you can get what's called a free audit. That is, you can go to that link and you can enter your website, and it will actually tell you how accessible it is or it isn't. So that is available to anyone at no charge. And then if you want to follow through with Accessibe to help address the issues, Accessibe is ready to help. But the bottom line is the audit's available. And I like Accessibe's audit because it's written and the information that you get is in English and easy to understand.
And it can be in other languages if you have a different language. So
Yes.
if English is not your first language, just know I think they have about, maybe 10, 20 languages that you can have it in. So
the real issue is it's written in a plain, straightforward way.
So excited.
Awesome stuff, people. Awesome stuff.
We just want to say thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, and let's do it again.
Oh, absolutely. We plan on spending quite a bit of time together. And
sounds like a
conspiracy, folks.
Conspiracy. Yep.
I told you it's happening.
Conspiracy.
Before we go, we want to say Tracy Walls, who's on the East Coast as well, said this was an awesome show. She is an Army veteran. So
if anyone wants to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, I'd love to hear from you. You can just as easily do it through speaker@michaelhingson.com. And if anybody wants to be a guest, we're always looking for good guests. So I should have said that earlier.
Oh, I already have a list of people for you that I'm going to send over to you in the email.
Right. And give us introductions. That'd be great.
Oh, yeah. We got quite a few people, I believe, at Disability Advocates of Kent County, and those who are friends also of 100 Shades. I think that Michael would be great. Patrick would be awesome.
Well, and
John
if
Cowley.
if anybody you know needs a speaker, let me know.
Oh,
Awesomeness.
absolutely. Well, guys, we'll see you on next week. And please try to stay warm if you've been in a snowstorm like us, and make sure you have everything you need. And boom.